Phil Allen here. Glad to be back for another session where we talk about film and how it interacts with Christian theology and cultural apologetics. And we're going to dive into some of the nitty-gritty of film criticism as we talk about genre as a view of the world, and also just some of the frameworks for understanding film, and specifically why I think that genre can be helpful to use as a lens. So first off, just thinking about moving pictures. So moving pictures are moving, right? They grew out of photography, and then to that added motion. So Lumiere brothers is an early example, and then it added the edit, and the edit is a really dynamic storytelling feature we don't even notice anymore, but it's a huge deal. So if you edit two scenes together, you get an effect, and the brain just naturally puts this together, and we recognize the story that's being told by these two uninflected cuts. With the edit, then we added sound, and so silent films became talkies, and then color, and we created this incredibly dynamic, emotional art form that is just naturally engaging to people of all different ages. It's just irresistible. It sucks us in. And emotion is really key to keep in mind, because different films convey different kinds of emotions and tend to affect us in different ways. But as we think about film art, we want to keep in mind all the different lenses. So there's cultural impact, and there's thematic criticism, there's the authorship of a movie, and genre. And so people often think about the cultural impact of movies. So for instance, when The Birth of a Nation came out, it horribly reignited interest in the Ku Klux Klan. Bambi famously put a dent in deer hunting, but films model behaviors and they affect the culture. There are also big ideas in movies that people interact with, and so you get themes like environmentalism in films like Avatar and Don't Look Up, and so critics who are avoidant or cautious of movies normally at the very least interact with the cultural aspects. So we see Christians, for instance, upset about films like Last Temptation of Christ or Dogma that seem to ridicule aspects of the faith, and they're reacting because of the cultural impact. But in order to dialogue with movies, we need to attend to all the dimensions: culture, thematic criticism, authorship, and genre. And in order to get a deep sense of what's going on in the movie, to really listen well to the voices and the way that a film is being told. How does it interact with the genre expectations, or just the cultural practices, the cinematic elements of a movie? That's all key. But in order to understand narrative art, we've really got to think about genre, because genre is a way of kind of grouping movies. You see this grouped in streaming services, you see this in video stores. And Noel Carroll says genre is a way of pre-focusing our emotions. What kind of movie are we watching? And George Steiner says it's a critique of life. So we have these different angles that films take on life. So they present it tragically, or comedically, or epically, or romantically. And all of these are true in some sense, at least in a small one. But when we think about it, this relation to Christianity, some people say, Christianity is inherently anti-tragic, and so stories with happy ending are more compatible with a Christian outlook. But you see these different, the way that genre plays out in storytelling. So Shakespeare has a lot of different kinds of stories. We see, for instance, fake death plots turn out differently, whether you're in a comedy or a tragedy. The things sort out differently, and all of these are true in some way. But comedy focuses our attention on comic amusement. So we see this, for instance, in the juxtaposition when a well-dressed man gets splashed by a puddle. But normally in comedy, when bad things happen, they're not ultimately harmful. The comedy makes a point, much like a rubber sword. It makes a point without drawing blood, though. And so, but you might say that in some movies they present comedy as just being a distraction from life. That's what we see in Sullivan's Travels. But as a Christian, we think the meaning of comedy can have deep theological significance. So one example would be the incongruity of living as beings with high value and purpose, but we fumble and we make mistakes. We have bodies as well as spirits, and there's a tension between them. But in comedy, we can kind of laugh at ourselves and our own predicament. And likewise, the positive turn of comedy can point to the comedic structure of of reality itself, that we think that we're headed toward a really good ending. It's notable that the greatest Christian poem by Dante is called the Divine Comedy, not because it's funny, but because it ends so happily.